Sarah sat quietly in the hospital room, her heart full of excitement and nervousness. The soft beep of the machines filled the air around her, and the faint smell of fresh hospital linen was everywhere. Outside the window, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a gentle light across the city. Today was a very important day for Sarah and her family. She was going to meet her second child for the very first time. Sarah's husband, Michael, sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. He smiled softly and whispered words of encouragement, telling her how brave she was. Their older son, Ethan, only 2 years old, was waiting with his grandmother in the hospital's playroom. Ethan had been very curious about the new baby in his mother's tummy. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but knew that soon he would have a little brother to play with. The doctors and nurses were busy but kind. After a few hours, the moment finally arrived. Sarah felt a sudden wave of pain and then relief. She heard a small cry, weak but full of life. Tears came to her eyes as she realized her baby was here. The nurse quickly cleaned the tiny baby and handed him to Sarah. Holding her newborn son, Sarah's heart swelled with love. The baby was so small, with delicate fingers and tiny toes. His eyes were closed, and he let out soft little sounds. Michael looked at Sarah with tears in his eyes, too. He gently touched the baby's head and whispered, "He's perfect." Sarah looked down at the baby and whispered, "Welcome to the world, little one." She held him close to her chest, feeling the warmth and heartbeat of her child. It was a magical moment. She could feel a strong connection with her baby, a bond that was both new and deeply natural. At that moment, the nurse brought Ethan into the room. He looked shy and unsure. His little face was a mixture of excitement and confusion. He held tightly to his grandmother's hand but slowly walked closer to his mother and the baby. Sarah smiled at him and said gently, "Ethan, this is your baby brother." Ethan's eyes widened as he looked at the tiny baby in Sarah's arms. He didn't say much, but whispered, "Mother, you bonded with him last night." Sarah was surprised by his words. She looked at him curiously. Ethan continued, "When is it my turn?" His voice was soft, almost like a question and a wish all at once. Sarah felt a sudden rush of emotion. She realized Ethan was feeling left out, even though the baby had just arrived. The toddler wanted to be close to his mother, to share in the special moments. Sarah took Ethan's small hand in hers and said, "You are always important, Ethan. I love you very much." She kissed the top of his head and held him close. Ethan's face relaxed, but his eyes still looked a little unsure. Sarah knew that the days ahead would be full of changes, not just for her and the baby, but for Ethan as well. Michael smiled and said, "We are all a family now. We will make sure Ethan feels loved every day." The family shared a quiet moment, wrapped in the soft light of the morning. Sarah felt thankful for her husband's support and for the chance to watch her children grow. As the day went on, Sarah cared for her newborn son, feeding him and rocking him gently. Ethan watched from a distance, sometimes coming closer to touch the baby's tiny hand. Sarah noticed Ethan's longing and tried to include him in small ways, asking him to help by bringing diapers or choosing a blanket. That night, Sarah sat by the window with both her children close. She thought about the little boy who had asked, "When is it my turn?" She knew that Ethan needed to feel special, just like the new baby. She promised herself she would find ways to make sure he never felt forgotten. The bond Sarah felt with her newborn was strong and immediate, but she understood that love could grow in many ways. She smiled softly, knowing that this new chapter of her life would be full of love, learning, and new connections. Ethan finally drifted to sleep, his small hand resting on his mother's arm. Sarah held both her children close and whispered a quiet prayer of hope and happiness. Tomorrow would be a new day with new chances for love and togetherness. The days after the baby's arrival were filled with both joy and challenges for Sarah and her family. The house felt different now. There were tiny clothes to wash, diapers to change, and endless moments when the baby needed to be fed or comforted. Sarah's world had changed, and she was learning to balance everything with patience and love. Ethan watched all these changes closely. He was still very young, and sometimes it was hard for him to understand why his mother's attention was no longer focused only on him. Before the baby came, Sarah had always been there whenever he needed her. Now, she seemed busy all the time. She was holding the baby, feeding him, or calming his cries. Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions: confusion, jealousy, and even a little sadness. One afternoon, Sarah sat on the living room couch, holding the baby in her arms as he slept peacefully. Ethan stood nearby, watching his mother closely. He wanted to be picked up, to feel the warmth of his mother's hug. But Sarah was tired and needed to rest. Ethan's little face tightened, and tears began to well up in his eyes. Sarah noticed and immediately set the baby down safely in his crib. She opened her arms and called Ethan to her. He ran into her embrace and clung tightly to her neck. "I miss you, Mommy," he whispered. Sarah kissed his hair softly and said, "I miss you too, sweetheart, but I have to take care of your baby brother. He needs me right now." Ethan didn't fully understand. He thought, "Why does the baby get all the love and care? What about me?" He felt like he had to compete for his mother's attention, but he wasn't sure how to do that without upsetting her. Michael saw the struggle too. One evening, after putting the baby to sleep, he sat down with Ethan and played with his toy cars. He made funny noises and laughed, making Ethan smile. "You're still very special," Michael told him gently. "Mommy loves you just as much as she loves the baby. She just has a lot to do right now." Despite Michael's kind words, Ethan's feelings didn't disappear overnight. Sometimes he threw small tantrums, crying loudly or refusing to eat. Sarah tried her best to stay calm, even when she felt tired and overwhelmed. She reminded herself that Ethan's behavior was his way of asking for love and attention. To help Ethan feel involved, Sarah began asking for his help with simple tasks. She asked him to bring a clean diaper or pick out a soft blanket for the baby. Ethan liked these small jobs. It made him feel important and closer to his mother and his little brother. Sometimes Sarah praised him by saying, "Thank you for helping. You're such a good big brother." Slowly, Ethan's attitude began to change. He started to show curiosity about the baby instead of jealousy. He would watch the baby's tiny fingers move or listen to his soft coos. One day, Ethan reached out his hand and gently touched the baby's cheek. Sarah smiled warmly and said, "See? You're already a great big brother." Even with this progress, there were still moments when Ethan wanted more. He missed the days when Sarah had more time for just him. Sometimes he asked, "Mommy, can you play with me now?" Sarah would set the baby safely aside and spend a few minutes playing with Ethan, reading his favorite books or building towers with blocks. Those moments were precious. Sarah noticed that when she gave Ethan her full attention, even for a short time, his sadness would fade, replaced by joy and laughter. It reminded her how important it was to balance her time between her two children. Michael also helped by spending more time with Ethan. He took him to the park, read bedtime stories, and gave him lots of hugs. This support gave Sarah the strength to care for the baby without feeling guilty about Ethan's needs. One afternoon, Ethan sat on Sarah's lap, watching her softly sing to the baby. His eyes were wide with wonder. "Mother, you bonded with him last night," he said again. Sarah looked down at Ethan and smiled, realizing that he was expressing both pride and longing. "And when is it my turn?" he asked softly. Sarah's heart melted. She hugged him tightly and said, "Your turn is every day, Ethan. You are loved very much. I will always be here for you." That night, as Sarah put Ethan to bed, he whispered, "I love you, Mommy." She kissed his forehead and whispered back, "I love you more than anything." Ethan fell asleep feeling safe and loved. Sarah knew the road ahead would have ups and downs. She understood that the journey of a family, growing with a new baby, was not easy, but with love, patience, and small moments of care, she believed they could all find their place together. In the quiet hours of the night, Sarah looked at her sleeping children and felt a deep sense of hope. The baby was new, fragile, and needed her. Ethan was growing, learning and discovering what it meant to be a big brother, and Sarah, as their mother, was ready to love them both with all her heart. Sarah began to notice more clearly how much Ethan was struggling with the changes at home. It was not just the new baby that made things different, but how Ethan felt about the attention his mother gave. Every time Sarah was busy with the baby, Ethan's little face would show signs of worry or sadness. Sarah's heart ached when she saw this because she loved both of her children deeply. One morning, Sarah sat with Michael in the kitchen, talking quietly about their family. She said, "I know Ethan loves his brother, but he feels left out. I want to help him feel special too." Michael nodded in agreement. "Maybe we need to spend some time with Ethan alone, just him and us," he suggested. Sarah smiled, knowing that was a good idea. That afternoon, Sarah decided to make a plan. She set aside a special time just for Ethan every day. She called it Ethan's time. During these moments, she would put the baby safely in the crib and focus only on her older son. They played with his favorite toys, read books, and sometimes just sat together talking. Ethan loved these times. He felt important, noticed, and loved. Sarah also started to explain things to Ethan in a gentle way. She told him, "Your baby brother is very small and needs lots of care, but that doesn't mean I love you any less." She held his hands and looked into his eyes. "There is enough love in my heart for both of you." Ethan listened carefully. Sometimes he would smile and nod, but other times he would still feel confused. Children at his age find it hard to understand why a mother's attention must be shared. It was a new lesson for Ethan, and Sarah knew he needed time to learn. One day, Sarah noticed Ethan watching her closely while she fed the baby. The little boy reached out his hand and touched the baby's tiny foot. Sarah smiled warmly and said, "You're a good big brother." Ethan's face lit up with pride. He wanted to be helpful, to be part of the baby's world. Sarah began involving Ethan in baby care in small ways. She asked him to pick out clothes for the baby or sing soft songs together. These moments helped Ethan feel connected and responsible. He began to see that having a new brother was not only about sharing his mother's time, but also about being a special person in the baby's life. However, it was not always easy. There were days when Ethan would cry loudly, wanting his mother's full attention. Sarah tried to stay calm, remembering that these feelings were normal for a young child. She never scolded Ethan for his emotions, but listened with patience and understanding. Sometimes Sarah felt tired and overwhelmed. Caring for a newborn was demanding, and balancing that with Ethan's needs was challenging. Yet, she knew this was a journey she had to make with love. Each small step forward was important. Sarah's family also helped in this time. Michael played games with Ethan and took him on walks to the park. Ethan loved these outings, and they gave Sarah a chance to rest and care for the baby. Sarah's mother visited often, helping with housework and watching Ethan so Sarah could have moments of peace. One evening, after a busy day, Sarah sat down with Ethan in the quiet nursery. She held him close and whispered, "You are my special boy. I will always be here for you." Ethan looked up at her with shining eyes and asked softly, "Mother, you bonded with him last night. When is it my turn?" Sarah smiled, touched by the honesty and innocence in his voice. She kissed his forehead and replied gently, Your turn is now, Ethan. Every day I have time for you, and I love you so much." Ethan's face relaxed, and he smiled back. That simple moment filled Sarah's heart with hope. The days went on, and Sarah saw changes in Ethan. He became more patient and gentle with the baby. He laughed more and asked questions about the baby's needs. Sarah felt proud of him and grateful for the love growing between her sons. Sarah also learned to listen to her own feelings. She accepted that it was okay to ask for help and to take small breaks. Self-care helped her be a better mother to both children. She reminded herself that loving two children was a new experience, and there was no perfect way to do it, only her way, full of care and effort. As the family grew closer, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she believed in the strength of their love. She imagined the boys growing up together, sharing moments of laughter, learning, and friendship. One night, as Sarah watched Ethan fall asleep beside her, she whispered a quiet promise to herself and to her children. She would always be there for them, ready to listen, to love, and to hold them close. No matter what, her heart was big enough for both her boys. Time passed, and the house slowly began to feel more like a home with two children growing together. Ethan was learning to understand the baby's needs and his own feelings at the same time. Each day brought new experiences, and Sarah watched, with hope, as her sons started to build a connection. Ethan was still young, but he wanted to be part of the family in a special way. Sometimes he would sit close to the baby's crib, watching the tiny movements and soft sounds. He was fascinated by the small fingers that grasped his own and the gentle breathing he could hear when the baby was sleeping. Sarah often saw these quiet moments and felt a deep warmth in her heart. It was clear that Ethan was beginning to accept and love his little brother. One afternoon, Sarah decided to take both boys to the park. Michael joined them, and the family enjoyed the fresh air and sunshine. Ethan ran around, laughing and playing, on the swings, while Sarah pushed the baby in the stroller. Michael smiled as he watched the boys together, imagining the many adventures they would share as they grew older. After returning home, Sarah noticed Ethan gently touching the baby's cheek. The baby cooed softly, and Ethan smiled. It was a small moment, but it meant a lot. Sarah felt proud and happy to see the bond growing between her children. Yet there were still times when Ethan's feelings were mixed. Sometimes he would want to be alone with his mother, and other times he wished to be involved with the baby's care. Sarah listened carefully and tried to balance these needs. She gave Ethan small tasks, like helping to choose the baby's clothes or bringing a favorite blanket during feeding times. These simple acts made Ethan feel important and included. Sarah also made sure to spend one-on-one time with Ethan every day. They would read books together, play with his toys, or go for short walks. These special moments helped Ethan feel secure and loved. He began to understand that his mother's heart had room for both him and his brother. One evening, as Sarah rocked the baby to sleep, Ethan sat close by, watching quietly. He looked up at Sarah and said, "Mother, I love my brother." Sarah smiled with tears in her eyes. "I love you both so much," she replied softly. Ethan was learning that love was not a limited thing that had to be divided, but something that could grow bigger and stronger. This was an important lesson for him and for Sarah. At night, Sarah sometimes worried about whether she was doing enough for both boys. She was tired from the many duties of caring for a newborn, and yet she wanted to be patient and kind. Michael was a strong support, helping with chores and comforting Ethan when needed. Together, they worked as a team to give their children the best care possible. One day, Sarah noticed Ethan looking at a photo album filled with pictures of when he was a baby. She sat next to him and told stories about his first steps and his favorite toys. Ethan listened with wide eyes, fascinated by the stories of his own early days. Sarah hoped this would help Ethan feel special and remind him of how loved he had always been. As weeks passed, Ethan's jealousy slowly faded. He began to enjoy playing with his baby brother and even helped Sarah by bringing toys or singing soft songs. The house was filled with laughter and the gentle sounds of children growing. Sarah's heart felt full. She knew the journey was not always easy, but she believed that love and understanding would help them all. The bond between her sons was becoming real and strong, and she looked forward to watching them grow side by side. One quiet night, Ethan came to Sarah's bed and whispered, "Mother, can I sleep here tonight?" Sarah nodded and hugged him close. As he drifted to sleep, he smiled and said softly, "When is it my turn to be your baby again?" Sarah kissed his forehead and whispered back, "You will always be my baby, Ethan, no matter how big you grow." In that moment, Sarah understood that the love between a mother and her children was endless. It changed and grew but never disappeared, and in her heart, there was always room for every child to feel safe, special, and deeply loved. As the weeks turned into months, the family settled into a new rhythm. Sarah felt a deep sense of peace as she watched Ethan and the baby grow closer. The little boy who had once asked, "When is it my turn?" was now learning that love in a family is shared in many ways. Ethan had become a proud big brother. He would bring his baby brother soft toys, gently rock his cradle, and even try to imitate the baby's soft coos. Sometimes, when the baby cried, Ethan would come running to Sarah and say, "Mommy, he needs you." His face showed care and understanding beyond his years. Sarah's heart swelled with pride. The bond between the brothers was growing stronger every day. Sarah noticed that Ethan's confidence was increasing too. He felt more secure knowing that his place in the family was safe. When Sarah gave him attention, he soaked it up with happy smiles and hugs. She found ways to celebrate his small achievements, like learning new words or taking his first steps. These moments reminded Ethan that he was special and loved, not just as a brother, but as a unique person. Michael often joined in these moments of joy. He read stories to Ethan and helped him learn to share toys gently with the baby. The family was learning together how to love and care for one another. Even the challenges that came with having a newborn seemed smaller when faced as a team. One quiet evening, Sarah sat alone watching her sleeping children. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, and Ethan lay peacefully beside her. She thought back to the first days after the baby's birth, when feelings of jealousy and confusion filled the house. Now those feelings were replaced by warmth and connection. Sarah realized that love was not something to be divided or competed for. It was endless, growing bigger with every hug, every smile, every shared moment. She thought about how Ethan's question, "When is it my turn?" had been so important. It was a reminder that every child wants to feel close, safe, and loved. Sarah felt grateful for the journey she had taken with her family. The hard days had taught her patience and kindness. The happy days filled her heart with joy. And the small moments in between, the quiet cuddles, the gentle touch of a hand, were the most precious of all. As Ethan grew older, he continued to be a caring older brother. He learned to share, to be gentle, and to protect his little brother. The baby looked up to Ethan with trust and admiration. Sarah smiled, knowing that these early bonds would shape their lives forever. One morning, Ethan climbed into Sarah's lap and said, "Mother, I am happy. Thank you." Sarah hugged him tightly and whispered, "Thank you for being my wonderful son." They both smiled, feeling the love that had grown strong in their family. Sarah knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew that love would always guide them. She was ready to face whatever came next, holding her children close in her heart. The family's story was one of growth, learning, and deep connection. It showed how love can grow even when it feels stretched, how patience and care can heal worries and fears, and how, in the end, a mother's heart is big, enough to hold all her children always and forever.